Welcome to the show.
Hey.
Ain't Gonna Hurt Nobody podcast, episode 31.
31.
Didn't realize like hitting 30 was like kind of a magical number. You know, a lot of people have been commenting like, oh, you guys have 30 episodes? I didn't know that. And I was like, huh.
Dirty 30?
Exactly. That's what we should have called it. Damn it. Where were you then?
Damn it. Because 31 is just kind of like a letdown number. It's like, okay, well.
Yeah, I got nothing. I was thinking of anything.
We made it another one. 31.
Exactly. But we're going to change it up. 31 will be special today because, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest with us. It's our friend and now yours, Mr. Boyu Li, the founder of Base Technologies.
What's up?
What's up? Hello. How are you guys? Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming out south with us and kicking it.
Of course.
Kicking it. So, wanted to have you come on the show. You have good energy. I think the first time we met was at Base Coffee, and it's going to sound random to you, but you gave me a Topo Chico seltzer in the glass bottle, and I had never had anything like that before. And I went to pay for it. You're like, no, you're good. I was like, you know what? This guy is cool. He introduced me to this thing I've never had before. And now.
And Topo Chicos aren't cheap. I mean,
which I found out because I Googled it to get some. I was like, oh, just putting these out.
Topo Chico, yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah. And fast forward, we were at I think it was a Cavassier event, and Joy, for those of you that don't know, Joy has an amazing ed tech consultancy based business called Blake Basics. Follow it at Blake Basics. And we needed to make sure we built a website. So we went to none other than you, Mr. Boyu Li. But before we get into that, that's present day. Let's start from the beginning. So let's start with where you're from.
So I would say at this point, like, I'm from Chicago. Like, I grew up in the West Coast, so I came to the United States when I was 6 years old. So my dad traveled around a lot. He worked for a bunch of universities. He worked at UCLA, so that was our first landing spot. And so we lived there for probably 7 years. And at 13, he got a job at UC.
Okay.
And so then we basically transplanted to Hyde Park. So I lived in Hyde Park for probably 4 or 5 years, and then we moved a little bit up north, I guess you can say, but it's really in the Chinatown area because my mom wanted to be closer to, kind of like what she knew a little bit, and so and then they bought a house in Bridgeport. Okay. So I grew up in kind of that Bridgeport area, but the early years I was bouncing around a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah, so I would say I'm a Chicagoan for sure now because I feel like that's what I know, and kind of a lot of our mutual friends I met through the South Side of Chicago, through Hyde Park. I met Spencer from Triple Crown there, all these other guys, and then that kind of just kind of opened a lot of doors for myself and for all the other individuals I met. And that's how I met you kind of through that process. Yeah.
That's fair. So then I'm surprised Chloe hasn't asked you the typical Chicago question. What high school did you go to?
So I went to Lab, which is a small private high school. So I went to elementary school in Bridgeport, in Robert Healy. Represent, and then
stand up,
represent Chinatown, and then I wanted to go to Whitney Young, and my dad, because he worked at UC, he was like, "You're not gonna go to Whitney Young." I got in, and then he was like, "We're gonna he kind of threw a curveball, and we're just like, we're gonna send you to this place called Lab," and I was like, "What is Lab?" And so we went. So then I ended up going there, and it was like, man, that's graduating class of 105 kids.
Okay.
Tiny, so it's a little school. And then they had their own elementary school, so it was a bunch of kids that all knew each other from kindergarten probably all the way to 8th grade, and then they went to high school together. And I was one of the ones that just got thrown into the mix halfway through. So that was kind of an interesting experience. But Lab was cool. I feel like it was a little bubble.
It is.
Yeah.
Not everyone gets to go to Whitney Young, the best high school there is ever was in school. It worked out.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, you seem okay, even though you didn't go there. So
Enjoy hinting on something. In Chicago, we ask people what high school they went to because it's such a large city.
Yeah.
So it helps you kind of narrow in on like if you might have people in common. That's why we ask that.
Yeah.
It's more of a like, hey, who do you know where you're coming from? Because this is such a large city, just so you can connect in that way. It's not because we all think high school is the best time ever, because it was not for me. But it's just like, okay, you probably live in this part of town, so I don't know anybody there. So that's why we asked that question, George.
I just always know about that question because I'll be like at mad events, and then somebody come up to me and be like, "What high school did you go to?" And I'll be like, "I'm not from here," and then they'll just like turn and walk the other way. Like I'm like, "Damn, y'all super bogus here." Like, no, I'm not from. Then when I say I'm from Milwaukee, it's just like I feel like a glaze goes over their eyes, and it's just donezo. So
wow, we've heard of it. We've never actually seen a person.
y'all got disdain. But I would say, yeah, that's why I asked that question, because that's what.
What high school you guys go to?
I went to Whitney.
You went to Whitney. See, there you go. That's a good school. Yeah, yeah. I wanted to go Whitney because all my friends went there.
What year were you?
Graduated 2002.
Okay. That was 2000. So
yeah.
We would have been there at the same time.
Yeah, it would have been cool. I still feel like it was one of those things where I'm like, I wonder how life would have been if I went to Whitney instead of Lab as well. But like, I don't have any regrets. I liked Lab for the most part, and I felt like it opened like a whole other like path that I don't think I would have really got to experience. Like if I just went to like, like a big school. So, but that was a weird transition from like Lab to like, because I went to college like at Purdue.
Okay,
that's a bigger school. Yeah. So then that was different too. So, but like I feel like you just don't know. So that curveball that my dad threw kind of worked out.
Got you. So went to Lab, went to Purdue, and then talk to us a little bit about what you did right after that, right? Because I think most people might know you or know of Base Coffee, which you were a part of for a long time, and we'll talk about that. But talk about a little bit about your path, because you mentioned that Lab opened doors you think might not have been opened otherwise. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I just mean like, going to like a small school like that, and then like it's for like a lot of rich people, right? When you say Lab, there's like this whole entire thing of what Lab is, and the people that know, it's kind of it's like own little cult like neighborhood, because it's part of the UC. It's all this stuff. So like, I think what I didn't realize about Lab, I knew like it was like this academic center of like people that are all smart and all these like intelligent kids that would come together. But I felt like the social element of it was what I kind of took the most out of a little bit. And you realize that like, it's like that old saying, business, like it's not what you know, it's who you know type of deal.
Yeah.
And Lab taught me that real quick. And I was like, oh, like this person's dad is this, or this person's mom is this. And then you start piecing it together a little bit, and you're like, wait a second, like, maybe some of these kids shouldn't even be in the school in that way. They just have connections, right? And that's kind of where like, there's like a bias to a certain degree. So I kind of realized that, and like, I come from a family that's like, we're like an immigrant family. So it's not like we had a lot of money. It wasn't like that. So when like right off the bat through school, I felt like I quickly understood there's a gap, right? There's like a social gap, or like and as well as like a financial gap between everything. So, but anyways, so with that, like I felt like going to Purdue after that was kind of interesting, because that was like a big school, so like it was kind of back to like public school days, like for me. And so, so I think that transition was also interesting, because it was like in this giant, in the giant campus with everything. And then you meet a lot of kids, and then, being from a city boy, like going to West Lafayette, Indiana was a little weird too, because I went to like, the story I always remember is like, I graduated in high school in 2002. And so that was right after 9/11.
Yeah.
And I remember freshman year, like my mom and my dad were driving all my stuff, right, to campus to like, set up the dorm room and everything. And on every gas station, as soon as we got through the border, it was like bomb their ass and take the gas.
Oh, wow.
And literally had signs that said that. And that's when I was like, this is crazy. I just remember seeing the sign, and I was like, I'm not in Kansas anymore type of thing. I was like, this is not Chicago at all. This is real, like, type of thing. So, like, I went in with that kind of, just kind of like a different vibe, right? I was like, maybe I should watch what I say a little bit. Like, everyone's probably more conservative. Like, being someone that's, Asian or whatever, maybe, it's just like there's all, like a minority, it might be different than how it was when I went to lab, right? Because lab was very open. It was kind of like everybody, it was kind of like the United Nations, I feel like, like everyone's represented.
Yeah, it's like almost like if someone's bold enough to bomb their ass and take the gas, it's like, what will they say to you in your face?
Oh yeah,
it's like that's intense. Like, it took you time to hang that sign up. So imagine what you say to people in person. It's just it's interesting. Like, because I know when we went to Marquette, it was just like I met people that I was like, oh, you like never met a black person, like, ever? Like, it's like, really? Like, huh?
Oh.
Like, all you know is Fresh Prince? Like, no, we ain't all like that. Like, what's happening?
Yeah. I think you said something right there. Like, it's a matter of, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I think the older you get, you realize it's who knows you. Because you can know someone, but if they're not going to kind of show love or reciprocate, or when you need that connection, it doesn't matter. Kind of a side tangent, but, you made that point, but I just wanted to land it. Just wanted to land it before I forgot it all.
But also, like, they might know you, but hopefully they're not competing against you as well. Because they might know of you, but if they're competing with you,
and they can't
help you. They're not gonna, because they trying to get ahead of you. That's why they know you.
Exactly.
Like a weird conundrum.
Exactly. So you did Purdue. You graduated from there.
Yeah.
Finished that. Then what you get into?
So afterwards,
I'm sorry. What did you get your degree in?
In like business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I went in actually for double E for electrical engineering.
Oh wow.
And then I changed majors like halfway through because I was just like, I didn't like it. It wasn't exactly what I thought it was. But it's ironic because now I'm back in the tech field a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny how life works. You don't really expect what it. That at least for me, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to go in being so passionate about something and then realizing that maybe that path was not what I wanted to do, and then like switching gears a little bit from that. Like my first job out of college, I was just done with school, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just like apply, because I'm a huge gamer. So I applied for like a store manager job at GameStop. So I worked at GameStop for like a year or 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I was like, maybe I should like, start taking life a little bit more serious. So then I applied for like a corporate job, like a corporate IT job.
Okay.
For it was at the time it was like Mid-American Bank, I think. So they were part of it was like Washington Mutual. Like there was a subsidiary of someone. So I worked there till probably right around the bank crash. Do you remember that? In like 2009?
Yeah.
Like 2008, 2009. That was a crazy experience because we walked in on like a Friday or something. But it was like random. Like no one really knew what was going to happen. And then everyone walked in on a Friday, and then they got a letter in like their mailbox. And I just remember like in the back area behind our parking lot, it's where all the people like hang out, kind of like water cooler-ish, like people smoke cigarettes, talk. And everyone's like reading this letter. And everyone was they were just like, oh, like saying thank you for your service for like 5, 10, 15, whatever, how many ever years. And you're going to be let go in like 3 months. Because the bank was getting bought out, and I was in IT, so it didn't really affect us in that way because they decided to keep the IT department. But everybody else that worked, like the tellers, even our IT manager, they fired her because they didn't want. I felt like it was just like a very corporate thing to do because they had their own thing, but they wanted to keep enough of the staff so they can transition over, but cut out all the other fat that maybe they just didn't need. So they got rid of a lot of the tellers, a lot of the sorting people. So it was kind of crazy. Like, with working at the bank, it was like they had a lot to do with like check processing. So all those guys, like a lot of the guys have been there for like probably since like in their like 20s. Like they worked there.
Whole life.
Yeah. And it was crazy to see because I just remember like this one woman, like Carol, like she was like a really nice lady. She was awesome. But like she was like kind of like bawling her eyes out a little bit because she was like, I have kids in college, I have mortgages and all this stuff. And, you know, like, and I saw that and I was like, this is crazy. I was like, this is corporate America, right? Like, this is what it is. Because I remember when, like, I started, everyone was like, oh, the bank industry is, like, solid. You're never going to.
Oh, yeah. You got no worries. You good.
Nothing's going to happen to the banks. And then I was like, and then when that happened, I was like, nothing is solid, right? Like, nothing is, like, you can't take anything for granted. And so that was an eye-opening experience. So I was like, wow. I was like, you know, and I was like, you know, in my 20s. So, like, for me, I didn't have any responsibilities like that. I didn't know anything, like, you know, I didn't feel that way. But watching these people, I was like, kind of just like, I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, I don't want to be in that position at that, you know, at that age, because that's rough, right? That's hard to swallow.
How much longer did you stay at the bank?
I stayed there for not that long after, because after that happened, I realized that like my clock was ticking a little bit, you know, because I think what they wanted to do was get rid of all the people that were seniors, like the senior
people that were making nice money.
Yeah,
exactly. The people that been there, that had, you know, gotten all the raises, gotten all that stuff, and then they, you know, so I stayed there for like probably 6 months. I think after that, like I stayed there and I just started looking for like other things, and I was like, well, what do I want to do? You know, like I could continue applying for, you know, like another corporate job, an IT consulting, or in the IT department for another industry, or, you know, maybe I should try something new. And so I found this startup company, actually. It was a company called Chicago Computer Club, and they were a small business. Or it was random. Like, I think I found them on Craigslist or something. They were just like interviewing people.
It sounds like it would be on Craigslist.
Yeah, it was like on Craigslist, I remember. And then so I just submitted a resume, and I was like, hey, I did this and this. Like, I know, you know, it's a startup company, and they were doing IT and network consulting for for normal people, but then also some B2B stuff, some business to business aspects of things. And so I was like, this seems interesting. And so, you know, went in for the interview. Me and like the CEO of the company interviewed me. So like we kind of hit it off a little bit. And then he was like, call me back like later that week and was like, hey, you know, if you're interested, like we'll offer you a position to come in. And so I kind of got to go from like a big company to like a little company, and to kind of see how that felt and how that process went. And so I was with them for probably like 6-7 years, actually. So like eventually what ended up happening was like the CEO wanted to like franchise out the departments.
Chicago Computer Club.
Yeah, so like Chicago Computer Club like franchised out, and then he created another company called Jexet. That was more like the B2B side of things. And so I ended up basically like buying into the franchise, so like creating like my own franchise for a while. And then I worked for him for probably 2-3 years, and then I did the franchise thing for like 3 to 4 after.
Okay.
And then at the end of that, we had actually ended up selling the franchise, like, you know, at the end, because he like pulled me aside, was like, hey, like I think I want to like move in a different direction. Not in like the sense of like he wanted me to continue running the company, but he didn't want to be a part of it anymore, because he had 3 daughters. And he was grinding from, you know, probably like 2002, like when I graduated high school. And he had a daughter that was like 13, 15, and 16 or something. And he was just like, I don't know my daughters. Like, never spent any time with the kids, right? And he was just like, and I respected him. Like, he was a really intelligent dude, and he like went through a lot of stuff to get to where he was and to be as successful as it was. So I always thought of him as like a mentor or someone that like I looked up to. And so when he said that to me, I was like, you know, I understand, like that's true, but I was also like, I don't feel like I would want to run this without you. Like it was like something that like we were all part of. And so, you know, the opportunity came around to like actually like sell everything. So then we just did it. And then I was like, you know what, let me follow that path a little bit. And I was just like, at that point, I felt like it needed another change, right? Like I felt like I need another change in my life or whatever it may be. And so after that, that's when like the base thing kind of started, was that idea.
So tell people about base and what that is.
So we started talking about bass, I think, a long time ago. For me personally, it was actually living with a lot of artists and musicians in Wicker Park. We had a studio prior to that.
Okay.
That was like it was kind of just like a random art studio. We had a friend that was a sound engineer, and then we had a bunch of friends that were DJs, graffiti artists, and all these like people that were talented in that scene. Like the idea of bass, I think, like came to fruition from that a little bit, because I felt like that was like bottling lightning. I felt like that was a cool space to have. It was like a really cool place to meet a lot of interesting people.
You talking about in Wicker?
Yeah. We were in this. We had a like this little side hustle thing called the Blackgate Studios, and some people that you may know, like Cesar Perez, was one of the like guys that we knew. He's a Chicago artist. My friend Luke, he was my roommate, and then I have another friend John. Like basically, it was like 3 or 4 guys. Then we all like kind of stayed, lived together. And then the reason why we kind of had to like survive a little bit was, our rent was ridiculous there. It was like a 3,000 square foot studio, and it was like $3,000 at the time, which is not bad for Wicker, I think, at that time. But
you guys living there too?
What?
yeah, we lived there too.
Oh, wow.
So that was crazy. Yeah, and then so we went in kind of. It's like you bit off a little bit more than you can chew. We walked into this space and we're like, whoa, this space is awesome. So we're like, let's sign the lease. Let's do this. We were young. And
the point of this space was this the first iteration of bass?
It's like everyone that started bass, like I met through that. Like we met at that place. And it was because of that, I feel like that bass eventually got built. That's where I met a lot of the people that I know now is through that process, right? So it's like little by little. I remember we moved in October, and our rent was $3,000 a month. And then this, November came, winter came. Our utilities bill for gas, because it was a studio space. There was no roof, so there's a roof, but it's just like a flat roof.
Yeah.
So all the heat just escapes, right? Like there's no insulation, and that building was old. So I just remember our first winter, our gas bill was like $3,000. So rent was $3,000, gas was $3,000, literally. And so we're like, well, this is crazy. We're like, well, we signed a 1-year lease. Like either we have to stay here, or like we have to leave and try to get out of this lease, or we got to figure something else out. And so one of our friends, Luke, had a cousin that used to do shows, and we're like, well, we should just throw underground shows.
There you go.
Our installations, we did music acts, and just it was like an underground venue basically.
Wow.
And so that was, that's basically what it would turn into. It was just you sell tickets online at the time, and then people would come, and then you charge at the door type of thing, and then we would just book acts, and then, that's kind of how we survived.
You were no longer working at a traditional 9-to-5. So you start off in the IT sector, and then you get with the startups, then you franchise a location. Then you get out of that altogether because the owner wanted to get out, and then you start more in the artistry space.
Yeah,
what you guys were doing there, just so all our listeners can at home could track along. So you started there, and then in the artistry space. Then how long did you guys do that? Just for that 1 year?
No, we did that for 2 years.
Okay,
but I guess my question, this might be a little bit off, but my question is what were the logistics of having acts and shows and then living there? Didn't you say you lived there? So then did you separate where y'all space was, where you lived, from where you had the shows? Or was it y'all would just be with the garbage bag, picking up stuff and then be like, all right, I'm going to bed. The gas is paid. What were you doing?
No, it was crazy. Honestly, it was not your ideal living situation. This was unorthodox, right? Everything was crazy. And I was working at the time still. I was still working. That was during the franchise part. So we were working on 9-to-5. We were still working on normal jobs.
Got it.
And we would just throw parties on the weekends to kind of support everything and do everything. And it was crazy. So to answer your question, Joy, inside that studio, there was 2 recording studios. And they had a sound booth in the middle. So we converted the sound booths to rooms. So there was 1 bedroom, and then there was a little closet for the mic, mic closet, and then there was another studio, and that was another bedroom. And then it's a wide open space. So then in the back corner, we built out another little kind of bedroom. So that was kind of like how we lived there. It was a very interesting like experience for it, right? Like looking back, I was like, I would not want to ever do that again. So to give you a little history of that studio, I found this out from the landlord like later on after we moved in. So that space was originally built out by a band, like a Chicago band.
Gotcha.
It was actually like, I mean, no one knows this, but in the 90s, I think it was like a band called Filter. They did like one song.
Yeah, a good name, but
yeah, it was called Filter. They did like one song. I think it was like, you know, that made them famous, but they were based out of Chicago, so they lived there, and then they built out that studio.
Oh, okay.
And so then through that process, like that's why I found out. I was like, well, why did this even exist? Because it never really operated as like an actual studio people would rent it. It was just like these musicians that lived there. So that was kind of like the history of it.
So y'all did have a kitchen then.
It did have a kitchen.
Okay.
It did have a kitchen. It had bathrooms too, obviously. No, it was livable. Like it was definitely a livable space, but it was just like we just couldn't afford it. So it was either move out or we had to do something to kind of survive and to kind of pay the bills.
So after those 2 years, what did you do?
So after those 2 years, I met Luke through there, which is one of the business partners at Base. I met Paul through that process, which is also he's the current owner of Base. So like,
so you can tell people, just people who might not know, and you know, we have a lot of listeners not even from Chicago. What Base is?
Base was basically a community-driven space, right? It was supposed to include food, art, technology. It was a like synergy of like 3 different kind of things. Like our logo was like a triangle. So the idea was like, you know, we each brought something different to the table. So like, you know, Paul brought in like the food. My background's obviously in tech. And then Luke was always, he was a DJ. He was in the art scene. So that was like the community driven aspect. That's literally how we pitched it to the owner of the building.
Gotcha. Which building are we talking?
The Bridgeport Art Center.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Bridgeport Art Center, like, you know, we walked in one day and it was random. Like, it was kind of like we just decided to set up a meeting with the building owner. And we went in just like, I remember, I think Paul brought in like a pour over kit for coffee. And we just walked into this meeting and we're like, let's make you some coffee. And we wanted to pitch you this idea of opening up of a cafe, like this unique cafe that's not like your traditional cafe in your building.
Got it.
And
what year was this?
2015.
Okay.
2015. Yeah.
And the owner, they was down, hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, I think he was like, the first thing I remember he said, he was like, you know, he thought it from a business standpoint, right? So he was like, if you guys were, because at the time there was no public facing thing in that building. Like it was like they had an art gallery there, but it was mainly like artists within the building and stuff like that. So it was people that rented art studios and then they had a gallery from it. So they were trying to build that process. There was a lot of construction going on that building still. He liked the idea of, I guess, the tech aspect, the coffee aspect, and then the community driven aspect of getting people to the building.
And so that was known as Base. That's known as Base Coffee.
Yeah.
Got you.
And then like the way you guys, it's like an 8 for the B.
Yeah. So that was kind of more of a tech thing for me because we wanted base.com, which you cannot get. I think it was like $30K to buy the domain for base.com. So I was like, well, we can just flip, like, you know, a lot of people in coding or whatever, they'll flip B's into 8s, or graffiti writers do that too. Or an A is a 4, you know, like a B is an 8, you know. So that was kind of where the 8A5E came around, you know. So that was why we named it. So we called it Base, but we spelled it differently.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a clever spelling. I was like, oh, okay. Like, cause it's I liked it. I didn't know it had a connection to the coding and stuff. So that's like a higher level. Than thought.
And I think that's what kind of attracted Joy and I, because I had always heard of this coffee shop in Bridgeport, where they sold computers and made websites. That's how it was always.
Yeah.
That was how it was explained. And they got some cool artwork in there as well. Like I was like, man, it seems like there's a lot going on. Yeah. And I finally got a chance to go to the space, and I was like, this works. It works.
It flowed good because I thought low key you was gonna be like, yeah. Our gas was so high, and so I just started selling coffee to pay the gas, and then I opened up a coffee shop. I literally thought that's what you was gonna say, but then you didn't, so that made it even better. But I'm glad.
Got you. So can you talk a little bit about what you're doing today? So Base Coffee started in 2015. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing today?
So, COVID was crazy, obviously. So, like the last, 2-3 years has been like a whirlwind, just in, my personal life, but as well as in business. So, like, at the beginning of the year of this year, I left Base. So, like, I left the coffee part of it, right? So, basically, me and Paul figured out the situation, and I was just like, hey, the direction that I think we both wanted to go in was going to be a little bit different. Like, he wanted to build out a kitchen and do all these other things as far as the culinary side. And I respect that. Like, he's a chef, so I got it. Like, I understood that was what it is. But through COVID, like, it made me realize, I was like, my passion's in technology. And, like, with tech, and especially with COVID being, everything became remote, and everything kind of shifting gears, and, like, realizing that so many, like, businesses needed kind of like this facelift for this new wave of technology, but as well as just like how to survive, like, survive a pandemic, and then how to kind of prepare yourself for, who knows, like another pandemic, basically, like using tech to leverage that. It kind of made me realize a little bit. I was like, I wanted to kind of expand more on the technology side, and I felt like that was going to be rough to do owning a restaurant, right? So, like, I think that the non-traditional aspect of trying to open a coffee shop with technology and everything, like, I think on paper, like, I think it could have worked, but I also think it's almost two different things. It's like, and so that was something I realized. It was like, in order to run it successfully, where you can run all these different moving parts successfully, you need either a lot of capital to kind of build it out, or it made sense to just separate the two, because I felt like, when you open a business, I feel like you got to enjoy doing what you got to do, right? There's like these benefits. There's always problems, you're always putting out fires, you're always doing these things, but I feel like it has to feel right. And I feel like the first 3-4 years of Base felt that way. But then as things started going, and I think the pandemic played a large part in it.
Sounds like it. Sounds like
it plays a large part in it for sure. I think everyone probably reflected.
You had a lot of time to sit and reflect, with no customers coming into
exactly. That was what it was.
Nobody was connecting,
that, right?
So no, that's exactly what it was. It was a kind of a reality check, right? And it was kind of sad in some ways, because I felt like you were hitting a stride going into the pandemic.
And that's when we met.
Yeah. So, like, you kind of felt like you were feeling like, hey, things are moving, things are going, and then you hit like a brick wall, right? That literally was like, March 17th, 2020, I remember, whatever date. I just felt like, I was like, man, this is pretty fucked up. Like, what are we gonna do? Yeah. Everything stopped, and so trying to survive that, I think was an eye-opening experience, because that's when we started focusing a little bit more on the tech side of things, a little bit more too. I always, I think it's always time, right? Like, time is always kind of like the enemy of an entrepreneur, of a business person. Like, you think you have more time than you do, right? Like, I think everything is like, I always think of it as like, with any business or any kind of idea, it's like lightning in the bottle. Like, you can only bottle it for so long, and if you can make it work in those years or whatever, then you have a chance to just skyrocket. But if you don't, because you could literally create a job for yourself as a business owner, right? Like, you could just create a 9-to-5 that you own the business for, but you're also working at this job, right? With COVID, I think that's kind of what made me realize. I was like, I think what we built is awesome, but I also felt like, what is the next step, right? Like, what is the next iteration of it, and how is it gonna move forward? How do you expand that business? And that was kind of I had a lot of time to think, obviously, during COVID. So that was something I kind of like reflected on. I was like, like, how does this work, And so like a lot of the tech stuff that we were able to do during COVID, I realized, I was like, that's kind of what I'd rather do, where it's more focused as one thing instead of trying to, balance everything.
Can you talk to us a little bit? You said you realized the need that small businesses, not even small, that businesses and entities, I'll call it, need for tech. Can you talk a little bit about the role of tech and what you do now?
Yeah.
And explain that, right? Because I think like tech is a very broad word, and saying, IT. Can you talk a little bit, about what are the things that people are missing who are trying to get something off the ground?
So most of my clients now, I think they're mostly businesses, right? So they're I think they're mostly business owners that are small to mid-tiered, and I think what they need is it's education. I think it's a lot of it is like empowerment for these company owners, in a sense. Like if you own a company nowadays, I feel like everyone knows. They're like, oh, I have to do social media, I have to have a website, I have to do marketing, I have to do all these things. But these things, in a large part, is not really their business. Their business is their business, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a lawyer, if you're an immigration lawyer or you're a personal injury lawyer, your job is to do that side, right? To do the litigation, go to court, go to trial, and all that stuff. So I think they need assistance in it, right? And so, I think from what I do is like I'm kind of like a jack of all trades when it comes to tech, because there's the hardware side, there's the software side of just the physical technology, like your laptop, your computer, like stuff like that. But then there's the web design, there's like the SEO, search engine part of it, where it's like, how do I get my business found? And those are things that are important, I think, for any business, right? So they all have that same need, and then they all have those same questions, which is like, how do I shift into this new generation, right? Like, how do I get found on Google? How do I get more customers? And so what I usually do is, it's a lot of my clients, like I feel like is it's kind of random, right? So like sometimes it will start with something like, that they have new employees at the office, like we need to set those things up, like as far as the new computer, new workstation. But then from there, it turns into like things like, hey, we need to update and facelift our website. Mm-hmm. And how do we do like the Google Suite? How do we do the Office, 365 integration so that we can set up our own company emails with it, right? What do we do with cloud? Do we need cloud storage? Yeah, like, should we back up our data to the cloud? Should we have our own dedicated server? So it's a lot of that stuff, right? It's a lot of questions that I feel like that a lot of company owners may have, but they don't know where to get that answer, right? And it's not, so a lot of it, I think, is just building trust with the business owners, and just being like, hey, like, I'm just trying to give you the information that you may need, and then from there you decide whether or not you want to do it or not. But these at least are options.
And it's not a one-size-fits-all solution that you provide.
No, it never is. And that's kind of what I enjoy about it, is I think every business has different needs. Every industry especially, right? So like everything's kind of compartmentalized in tech, and I think that's, you brought up a great point where you're like, tech is very general. It's super general. So like when everything, I think everyone bottles things into tech that have, that like, I feel like they struggle with to kind of, they just think, when you're like, oh, you're an IT person or you're in networking, they're like, well, you do web design, which is not really related to IT at all. And it's like, it's like when you go in and, kind of troubleshoot a network printer or something like that. And that's very different than like search engine optimization. Like these are, but I think the thing is that it's kind of, they need someone that they trust, right? It's like why old people sometimes ask their kids about technology, because they're like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? And I feel like that's kind of the role that a lot of small to mid-tier businesses need from a, like from a business owner's perspective, where like I need to find someone that can actually help us, like guide us through this process, and so that we're not spending money, where we don't need to.
Yeah, and then like too, like it's really interesting to hear you talking about this, because it's just like people outside of the trust, they do need to trust the person, but they don't want to. People are like so hypersensitive, like about tech and not knowing how to navigate, and they don't want to look like they're stupid. It's like a lot of insecurities as well. So it's like, I feel like, because I'm not, whenever people ask me about the tech, they want me to fix their laptop and their printer, and I always have to tell people like, yo, I'm not a hardware person. I'm not finna fix your printer. Like, I don't know how to do that. I kind of don't want to know how to do it, but I can train you how to use your printer. Like, I'm a Google certified trainer. I'm a trainer. Yeah. So I'll teach you how to use the tech. Whereas, so there's like so many different like levels to just like how Coley said, someone just says tech. That is very broad. And I just feel like sometimes the IT guy gets that rap like, oh, you're a jerk. Like, oh, what do you mean? You should have just hit the on button. Like,
or it's like, intimidating,
Yeah, it can be intimidating. So I think it's like a mix of building trust, but also like people have to know like, oh, this person is gonna be patient with me. They're gonna help me. They have my best interests at heart. Like, so it's interesting what you're saying. Like, it's very interesting to me.
Yeah, patience. That's literally what.
Yeah, there's a lot of patience.
You need patience. Yeah, you need patience for sure. I think that's what like being an educator is, right?
Yeah,
like, being a teacher in that way. There's a lot of patience to it for sure.
So there's an intimidation factor. Can you kind of talk about like the value and price factor, right? Not asking you to put out your rates, but I think a lot of people hear tech, IT, build a website, SEO. I think they automatically like, I can't afford that. It's not for me. I was surprised at how affordable it is and the credibility that's given to your business by having a professional a website that's professionally built. Not investing in things that you assume that you need it right away, because you can't do that because you don't have a website. So what's the point in doing all these social media ads if you're just driving to your social media page? Like, you need a website or a place to intake this information. So I guess my question is, can you just talk about the value of the things that you do for small to mid-sized businesses and those that might be intimidated otherwise?
So usually I would say that, a website's a business card, right? Like, that's what it is. That's how I always viewed it. And I think the idea is that if you go to a meeting, if you go to a conference, like when someone's like, oh, you introduce yourself, you would pass them a card, right? You would be like, oh, here's my card. My name is Bo. This is what I do. Come reach out to me. But if you don't have a card, that looks weird, right? Because people will be like, why don't you have a card? So that's kind of the same idea as think like from a website perspective. It's the digital form of it. But I think the thing with I think a lot of people it's not that they don't know, but I think a website is if a website is 50%, the other 50% is the search engine part, right? Search engine optimization. SEO, that term gets thrown out a lot. And that's almost, just as important, if not more important, than how a website looks, how it, what the aesthetics, how the design of it is.
Can you explain to people at a fifth grade, if you drop it down to a fifth grade level, what is SEO?
Yeah, so SEO stands for search engine optimization. Basically, the idea is that, like on Google, right? So Google is there's a computer. It's not done by a person. There's like a computer algorithm that just searches. It searches and crawls websites. Like, it basically reads through, millions of billions of sites or whatever, based on location, both based on key terms, based on what you're looking for, right? Like, if you go on there and you're like car repair, right, or car mechanic, it's going to find it based on your geographic location and where you're located, as well as ratings, right? Like how the Google ratings are, and and how that relates to your search, right? Maybe you're like typing brakes, or you're typing in like, change oil, right? So that's what the computer from Google, that algorithm does. And the idea of search engine optimization is how do you get the computer to pick out the things that for your company, like the services you offer, right? Because people are not going to go search for something that they already know of. Like if they know, for example, if they know base technology, well, I'm not really marketing towards you because you already know probably who I am. You probably know something about the company. Like that's different. But if someone's like, I need computer repair, or I need like, network printer setup, or web design, or database database management, like they're gonna search for those terms because they're broad, and it's how they get Google to pull your site up.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of the gist of it.
So you help with all of that when you're consulting with a client, and and you get an engagement, right? So if you're building out the website, you're gonna, whether it's you create a blog within the website, or whether it's in your masthead or wherever, you're gonna find the key things that are call it germane to that industry to help pull in that SEO.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what's interesting is that it's always different for every industry, and every company is different, right? Because of what their services are, what their niche things are, and it's a team effort, right? So like I go in from the tech side, but then they themselves have to also, it's like we're in it together. Like I need you to help me to help you type of thing, right?
Gotcha.
Because like I don't know your industry as well as you do, and I can help kind of guide you in the sense of like what we're trying to do here. But really, it takes a lot from the business themselves, right? That they have to also put in 50% of the work to get it so that it elevates them, so that it helps them grow. Because you see it, I see it from business all the time. With like certain businesses are better, and you are like, why is it that they're getting more clicks, or why is it? And there's all these other factors. Obviously, it's not just like a button that you just press, but it's interesting to see that. That's where the creative side, I think, comes in, right? Certain businesses are very creative of how they market or what they're doing, that I think elevate them.
Because I would say, like, just from my own experience working with Bo, like, when I first started, I feel like you have to know who you are, like, who you are as a business, what you're trying to accomplish. And sometimes you don't know that when you're first starting out. You're like, oh, I'm good at this. People want to pay me for this. And then you're just trying to figure out, like, what are the services you offer? Like, I feel like if you have an idea or a business, it's okay for it to have, like, a first draft, second draft, whatever it is, especially with your website. But I agree with the lightning in a bottle thing. It's important to at least, like, start. Like, get yourself out there. I mean, I was a teacher. The pandemic hit. I was like, oh, I'm good at technology. People actually want to, like, pay me to do this and, like, present at conferences for this. Coley was like, you need a website. I'm like, oh, okay. And then you're just like, but it's just like a gradual journey, because I think with Bo, I think I've been working with you since like 2020, or I don't even know now, but
yeah, I think even before that.
Yeah. And then like just this year, it's 2022, 2 years later. Now I'm getting like, oh, here's my services. I didn't have that before. I just had a website. Like you can kind of evolve with it. And I agree with you, Bo. Like you helped me along the way to like evolve. Like you're like, oh, you need to do this, this, and this. And sometimes you just don't know, when you first starting out. So it's okay not to know, but I feel like it's not okay not to just try. Like luck favors the prepared. Like just try. Like put yourself out there. That's it.
Yeah,
it is. It's true.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up a little bit on time, but Bo, I think, I want our listeners to walk away with a couple of things. There's a couple of things and why we liked your story. One, not everybody has like a straight path to get to where they are, right? Or like when you're a consultant, you've probably lived a couple of different lives that allows you to consult, right? Like you literally, you started off managing a retail, got your degree to manage a retail store, to then work for a bank on the IT side, to then work at a startup, right? Just working at a startup, regardless of what your role is. You're doing some of everything. So therefore, you've become an entrepreneur. So you've started businesses. You've incorporated things. You've worked with lawyers, so you understand that side of it. Then you go into this creative space to do some things, and then you go into the culinary space and you pull it all together to now go back to the tech, but now you're running stuff. So I think a lot of people will say, well, how does this guy know everything? Well, you've lived 5 different lives there. So I just want to say I'm proud of the work that you and my wife have done, like in building like basics out. It's amazing. Just the other day, somebody was complimenting Joy's website, and it went from being something, you know, a LinkedIn post of like, oh, wait, you do this for real. Mm-hmm. We got to talk now. And I think we just want people to know that, like, there's professionals out here like you that, for a very reasonable fee, that can get your business up and running to a place that you'll make money off of it. And Boyu Li is your guy.
Thank you, Cole. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea of base technology is like, if I had to sum it up, it's always to empower people with technology, right? Technology to me is like a leveraging factor, right? Everyone talks about how tech is supposed to be this freeing thing, right? Because it's a levels the playing field, no matter like age, race, you know, like financial, like the idea is that everyone should be able to have technology, have a phone, have those things. And I feel like sometimes it doesn't feel that way in the tech space. It's actually very like top heavy. Like, you know, it's like everyone doesn't, I feel like, have all the resources, right? It's kind of an issue that I think is something that I always notice in technology. It's like, you know, when you have a big business, when you have, you know, the resources to hire IT people, to hire a web designer, to hire all these things, that's easy, right? That's easy to grow because you got the financial wherewithal to just run it. It's a small and mid-tier businesses, and I feel like that's what like our country is built on, right? It's like, you know, you build small businesses, right? That's kind of the idea of it. So like, how does a small business compete with big business? Well, then technology is part of that, right? So it's like, how do you as a small business leverage that to help your business grow into a big business?
Yeah,
I don't think there's a better way to wrap this up. So, Bo, can you plug any of your social handles, websites, so people can find you?
Yeah, so our website is basetech.xyz. Our handles are at Base Technology Inc. On Facebook, Instagram. But our website's probably the easiest way to get a hold of us because our email or our phone number and information. You can set up free consultations there as well for web or for IT. So that's probably it. It's easy.
That's what's up. Yeah. So as you know, Bo, we like to wrap every show with a little segment called Things We Wish We Would Have Known. And it's basically just looking at your life and looking at experiences. And more or less it's just dropping a nugget. So, you know, when our kids watch this when they get older, they'll be like, oh, I'm glad we heard this from mom, dad, and their guests. So I'll drop it off. I'll start it off right here. I wish I would have known, like, it's not that hard to dive in and like build out a website, like, or having a podcast. It's not that hard to do it. Like, part of it is just getting up and doing it, and then you'll meet people, you'll find people along the way that can help you make it better. Because eventually, we're gonna need to get a website for Ain't Gonna Hurt Nobody. We bought the domain. We need a website for this show. We have so many things and interests. We need to get that up and going. And it seemed intimidating when we first started, but it's really not. And you know, I wish I would have known. It's like, it's not that hard. It can happen. It's gonna cost, but it's an investment that's gonna be worth it. So that's my little thing. I wish I would have known.
Okay. Well, I can go second because I don't want to put Bo on the spot. Like, we don't got to go in order. Like, boom, boom, boom. But no, I would say, I think something I wish I would have known is like, well, it's like 2-part. First part is it's okay. Like, I do work in technology, and I was like, oh, I could just build my own website. I technically know how to do it, but sometimes it's okay to like let somebody else help you, especially if 1, you don't have the time, 2, you don't have the time, and then I don't know what else, and 3, you kind of like got the funds to do it, because it took me a while to figure out this is what I'm good at. I need to focus on these 4 things, and anything outside of those 4 things, it's okay to pay somebody or to get the help you need so you can actually like move forward. That's not, no one's going to be like, nobody has yet to come up to me and be like, Joy, you're a tech trainer. You didn't build your own website? Like nobody like cares. Like nobody cares that somebody like help me through that process. Like just like get it done. Like if that's the other person, that's what they're really good at. Like why not let them do it? Like release the reins? Like let somebody else do it, which in turn will help you and help you to focus on like what's most important. And then the second part, just listening to you, Bo, and like all your like stories and kind of a lot of your stuff kind of ended with kind of sad events. But I would say like it's interesting too. It seems like some people like they always be like, just move on. I was like listening to a podcast today and that's what they said. But then the lady was like, instead of telling somebody to move on, it's just like, it seems like you just move forward. And I feel like in some ways, that's what some people, instead of being like, oh, I just can't let go of this, it's like, you may never let it go, but just try to move like forward. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, so I guess to follow kind of what you said, because that it actually kind of flows with what I was going to say, which is if I was young, like when I was younger, I wish someone would have like sat me down and told me like, don't be scared of failure, because I think the word failure is this thing in where it's like, you know, you have this negative connotation to it, right? Where it's like, oh, you left this job or you failed at a business or you transitioned out of something. But I think what it really should be in business is that those are lessons, right? If you don't fail, you're probably not going to succeed. And even if you succeeded, that's probably just out of pure luck or just randomness, like that happened to you. And great, if that happened to you, that's awesome. But I think failure is what builds that character. That's why I like Chicago's, right? It's a blue collar city. No, there are no free handouts. There's none of that stuff. So it's like you had to fail, and failing is not really failing to me, right? Failing is just like you're gonna learn, you're gonna grow. It's education, right? You won't make those same mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to try to elevate yourself the next time around. And you're going to take all those life lessons, all those like bruises, and you're going to, kind of remember that and apply it to the next thing. So I think it's, for me, it was just like don't be afraid to build. Because I know how I am as a person. Like, I like to build stuff, right? So like what ends up happening is I'll build something up, and then sometimes like I'm real with myself. Like I'll get kind of bored with it, right? And then I have to go and try to build something else. But through that process, like if you can keep building, keep growing, the people that you know and the network of people that you have, those people will follow you along, I think, through that process a little bit. So I guess like, I think when I was younger, it was like, I wish someone told me that, where it's like, don't be afraid to fail, right? Just run it, hit the wall and then bounce off and just, get back up and do it again. Because, I think in business, I remember one of my buddies, he does like commodities trading. So he's like a trader, but he was like, you're wrong like 80% of the time. That means you're losing money 80% of the time. Mm-hmm. But the 20% that you're right will actually make up for that 80 and beyond. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So you'll fail and fail and fail. But if you keep at it, like you'll learn from it from here and there. And then eventually you will be successful. Right? So I think it's kind of like, just don't give up.
We're at time with that one. Remember, you can fail 80% of the time as long as those 20%.
You got to still work at it, though. Yeah, you got to still work at it. Yeah. It's not like, let me just fail a bunch and, like, whatever. Like, I'll be all right. You got to keep going. But, yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Well, Bo, thank you for joining us today. Episode 31. We told you we make it special, everybody. Ain't Gonna Hurt Nobody podcast. We out.
Peace.
Thank you. Peace.